This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Here's your host, Brandon Contes.
Alrighty, welcome to episode 95 of the Awful Announcing Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Contes, and with WrestleMania set for this weekend in Las Vegas, we are joined by an International Pro Wrestling Hall of Famer. He is the host and founder of Busted Open Radio. He is Dave LaGreca. Dave, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. I know this is a busy week for you, and you'll be hosting several shows from Vegas. We are recording this podcast on Tuesday, I should note. What is your, when are you heading out there? What's your schedule of shows out there this week?
I'm flying out there on Wednesday. We're going to be live every morning, but we're doing fan-facing events on Thursday. We have our master's class at Circa nightclub. And then on Saturday, we have our annual WrestleMania party at the Infinity nightclub at Wynn. So all our hosts are going to be out there. We got some special guests. So I'm really looking forward to it. I love seeing the Busted Open Nation. So I'm excited about Vegas. I really am.
Well, certainly we'll talk a bit about this weekend, and I do want to kind of start with just the origins of Busted Open. But what was being inducted into the International Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame like? Because I believe that's an actual physical Hall of Fame, not just a list on a website, correct?
Yeah, they have a physical Hall of Fame in the arena in Albany. So they have a section of the arena that they have the pretty impressive museum. And I was totally surprised by it. They gave me a call. Seth Turner, who is the caretaker, told me that he loves what, I created with Busted Open and loves the appeal of the show. And he wanted to induct me. Mark Henry, as a surprise, flew in from Texas to induct me. Also, Bill Apter, who's a bit of a mentor for me. So it was a great thrill. I thought it was just an honor, and it was awesome. So.
Could you have envisioned that, this is when you started Busted Open, that this is where it would take you to something like that?
No, Brandon, when I started Busted Open, I didn't think it was going to be more than 1 hour once a week. And that's what it started. Myself and Doug Mortman started it in 2009, and it was 1 hour once a week. And now we are live 7 days a week on SiriusXM. And hopefully by the end of the year, we'll be 24/7, have our own channel on Sirius.
When did you get into radio? Because it wasn't a traditional go to Syracuse, get an internship, get on air, move up the ranks. What were you doing before radio?
I've been involved in radio since 2000. But before I got into radio, I was a bank manager. I was a bank manager. I got divorced, and in a course of 3 months, I got divorced, and the bank that I worked for sold to a different company. And so I lost my wife, I lost my job, I lost my house, all in the course of 3 months. So I decided to go back to school, go back into communications at 30 years old. And here I am 23 years later, and Busted Open's been on the air for 15 years, and I'm living the dream. So yeah, quite a change from now, from where I was 23 years ago.
And your brother was already involved in radio at that point at WFAN and then ESPN Radio in New York. Were you were you watching him and thinking that this was something that you could do that whole time?
Yeah, I mean, we both majored in communications in college, but he went right into broadcasting. He went to Ramapo with a scholarship for baseball, and his sophomore year, he decided he had to make a choice whether it was baseball or radio, and he chose radio. And obviously, he made the right choice because he's been doing it ever since. So it was always a dream of mine. My life went obviously in a different direction after school, but when I was at the lowest of lows is when I decided to live my dream, and it's worked out.
What was your first role at Sirius?
Well, at Sirius, I was the morning show producer for NFL Radio. Okay. So I worked on NFL Radio, and I did that for quite some time before I fell into Busted Open.
How did you get to start Busted Open then?
It was begging.
Yeah.
and pleading just to get an opportunity. And like I said, I started it with Doug Mortman, and we did it once a week for 1 hour. And I'll never forget my boss at the time, Steve Cohen, said, "Don't let it affect your day job." And until it became my day job. So
at that point, like, is it just a passion project, just like a hobby, or did you see a void in something like this for wrestling?
both. I mean, people have tried it. Jody McDonald did it. He did an overnight show at WFAN on the weekends. So other people have tried it. So I thought there was definitely a void. I told my boss, for serious, like, how do we not have a wrestling show? Like, it just feels like we have all this specialty programming. How are we not doing anything with wrestling? So, and it was a passion project, because when I first started doing it, I wasn't getting paid for it. I had my job there, and this was just a passion project. But it blew up so much that they offered me a full-time job doing it. So I've been doing it ever since, and I love it.
Was it hard to get your bosses to believe in a
Yes.
wrestling show?
Yes, and yes. It was a struggle. And I'm sure, Brandon, wrestling has a stigma about it. People who aren't wrestling fans don't understand it. It's like the old saying, if you don't understand it, no explanation will do. And if you get it, no explanation is needed. And I think it's the same thing here. The hardest thing was getting SiriusXM to be on board with it until they saw the numbers. And once they saw the numbers and the popularity, they were all on board. And right now, wrestling is no longer like a guilty pleasure. Pro wrestling is mainstream. Pro wrestling is big or bigger than it's ever been. So it's not a struggle now, but early on, it was definitely a struggle.
What caused that change? Like, why has it gone to become mainstream?
I just feel timing. Everything is in cycles, and I feel like right now pro wrestling is just big. I think it's the perfect combination. I actually think, Brandon, that decision makers, like when it comes to networks, were fans in the Attitude Era. So I think the fans that were fans in the Attitude Era are now decision makers.
Yeah.
When it comes to mainstream companies, I think that's a big reason why, like, wrestling is as big as it is, because decision makers were there when wrestling was pop culture in the late 90s.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think I read somewhere that Busted Open was the top sports show on Sirius, whether that's still the case or it was at some point, but like not just the top wrestling show, but the top sports show overall. Am I correct?
It is. It is. It's the most popular sports show that there is in the sports platform, which is crazy to think about. It's crazy to think about. But if you really think about it, Brandon, it's not. And here's why. When we first started, there were no podcasts. When we started in 2009, it wasn't the community that we see right now. Baseball, football, basketball, you can get that in any market, multiple radio stations. But pro wrestling talk, especially what we do with two-way talk, where when I started Busted Open, I wanted it to be sports talk radio. So we take phone calls. There's nothing like that. And now we've seen the emergence of podcasting, which I'm very, very happy about. I'm a firm believer in our community. I'm a firm believer in helping each other in our community. That's why I try not to say no when I get offers to come on any podcast or shows, because I feel like we're all part of the same family. So if you really think about it, Busted Open, when it comes to SiriusXM, if you want wrestling talk, the only place you could go is Busted Open. So
when did you start to realize that the show was becoming a hit and taking off and could be something that grew from just that 1 hour a week to eventually, like you said, hopefully having its own channel?
When we started to do live shows, and then we saw the crowds that would come to our live shows, that's when I realized that there was some mass appeal here. And then, our staff and SiriusXM, our staff right now is tremendous. When sales and marketing started to be involved in our show, that's when I really I knew that it took off.
Has the show growing changed the way that you talk about pro wrestling?
Well, when I first started, it was just me. It was me and Doug Mormon. It was two fans.
Yeah.
So the way two fans talk are much different than when I'm talking to a Bully Ray, a Mark Henry, a Tommy Dreamer, because they're experienced. They know what it's like to be in the ring. I don't. So the dynamic now is the performer and the fan. But when we first started, it was two fans. So absolutely, it's definitely changed.
What is the is there a divide between WWE and AEW fans, and how do you kind of placate that?
I don't placate it. I try not to. There definitely is a divide. Tony Khan used to do a weekly segment on our show called Tony Time every Wednesday. So when we did those interviews, I got accused of being an AEW shill, and I'm on the AEW payroll. Now that the WWE creatively has gotten so much better, because if you listen to the show in 2017, 2018, the way I talked about the WWE, much different than the way I talk about the WWE now, because it's better. The product is better. So now I'm accused of being a WWE shill and on the WWE payroll. Like the reason I bring it up, Brandon, is like you're never gonna win.
Yeah.
Like there's gonna be a portion of the audience that's gonna disagree with what you're saying. That's awesome. That's cool. I love passionate fan bases, but you can't placate to an audience. You just have to be yourself and give your opinions. So the only paycheck that I get is from SiriusXM. So my opinions are my own. So like perfect example, I've praised the WWE a lot, but as we've gotten closer to WrestleMania 41, I've said that I haven't been crazy about the build towards WrestleMania 41, especially compared to the last couple of years. That, I can have relationships with companies, and I've been lucky enough that I've asked to do things for companies, for AEW, for TNA, for WWE, but I'm not paid by any company, so I'm able to give my honest opinion about what's going on.
Is wrestling's fan base, is it large enough to be split? Like it was always wrestling fans versus not wrestling fans. Like, can it be wrestling fans versus wrestling fans with WWE and AEW?
Yeah, and Brandon, I think like when we look at, and I fall into the trap too. I think we all do. We look at social media, and we kind of judge the fan base and what they're thinking by social media. Social media is the vocal minority. It's a very small portion of the people that are actually following and watching. I actually think there's a larger audience that watches both products. Like I think people who watch AEW watch WWE, and I think there's a big portion of the WWE audience that watches AEW as well. So I get caught up in social media, but I got to remember that social media is the vocal minority. It's not the true voice of the majority of people who are watching pro wrestling.
Yeah. Does WWE and AEW like the divide?
I think they play off of it.
Yeah.
I think they both do. If they didn't, you wouldn't hear some of the barbs that are thrown on live TV.
Yeah.
CM Punk is the king of passive aggressive behavior on the microphone. Like he'll throw out like a dig at AEW audience. And Brandon, if you really listen, when he does it, you go to social media, everybody's like, "Oh my God." But if you listen to the audience, it goes right over. They don't care. Which again, I think it's you're talking to a small portion of the audience.
Do you feel like you're covering wrestling? Like, do you consider yourself a journalist or a reporter?
No, I'm not. And God bless. I love the fans, and they're entitled to their opinion. I always get remarks like, "Hey, you're supposed to be a journalist, or you're supposed to." No, I'm not. I've never claimed to be. I've never written anything in my life. Like, what are you talking about? I'm not a journalist. My role on the show is I'm a fan. That's my role. I am a fan. I am not an analyst. I'm not a journalist. The dynamic on our show is wrestler fan. That's the dynamic of Busted Open. So I am a fan. I love it when we were going to WrestleMania 40, and I'm yelling and screaming about my fandom for Cody, and people are like, "You're supposed to be, you're supposed to be unbiased. You're a journalist." No, I'm not. I'm a fan. I'm a fan of Cody Rhodes, and as a fan of Cody Rhodes, I'm going to come on the air and talk about my fandom of Cody Rhodes. So I am not, and no disrespect, I am not Dave Meltzer. I am a fan. I'm Dave LaGreca, pro wrestling fan.
When you're interviewing a pro wrestler, how do you balance interviewing the person versus the character?
I feel it out. I see where I feel like where the interview is going. Most of our interviews are with the person, not the character. There are times it has been the character, and I am not going to force a guest to go in any direction. I let them kind of guide. Like if they want to do it storyline in character, it's not going to be a great interview. But I'll go along with it because there's a story that they want to tell. I kind of like it when I get to talk to the actual person and not about like, behind the scenes stuff or trying to get. I'm not a big fan of the gotcha question. Like I'm going to ask something. Oh, I got you. I kind of want to know what that person's like and a different side of that person that maybe people don't see. And, I think it's worked for us. We've been doing it for over 15 years, Brandon, without doing quote unquote spoilers. One of the things that I preach from day one is that we're not trying to uncover anything here. We're not trying to expose anything here. I'm not trying to break news. It's, again, the dynamic of fan and wrestler.
I think it was last year when CM Punk said pro wrestling press conferences, he called them cringe. And I think he was complaining about the fact that you have real reporters there asking questions. I know you're not a reporter. You don't consider yourself a journalist, but is that a strange concept? Real reporters asking characters about a storyline at press conferences?
I'll use the most infamous one as an example. The All-In press conference where Punk, mentioned Colt Cabana, went off on the EVPs at AEW. Now, if that was a press conference for any other sport, don't you think the follow-up questions from everybody in that room would be about what CM Punk had just talked about? But go back and watch that All-In press conference. The next question was about MJF's return, and they were talking about the veterans in the lock. Nobody asked about what he said in the first 5 minutes of the press conference. So don't give me the whole journalist bullshit. Like if you were an actual journalist, wouldn't you have asked questions regarding what CM Punk followed up asking about Colt Cabana? The EVPs, who are you talking specifically? Who are you talking about? And what are you talking about? What incidents are you talking? None of those questions had anything to do with what everybody was talking about for months after the press conference, Brandon. So, yeah, it's a little odd. I think those scrums are a little bit. I think they are a little bit cringe. And again, I'm not disrespecting anybody that was in that room. They all have a job to do. But wouldn't you agree, Brandon, that if that was in any other sport, the follow-up questions would have been about what CM Punk had just said?
Yeah, of course.
Nobody asked about it, Brandon. Nobody. So.
Yeah, you had just mentioned Meltzer. What is Dave Meltzer's value to wrestling?
I think Dave Meltzer is extremely valuable. I think Dave Meltzer at times gets a bad rap, and Dave Meltzer is Dave Meltzer. You talk about like his star rating system or things about that. Now, do I buy into the star rating system? I don't. I believe that everybody has their opinion, and you should make up your own opinion by watching the matches yourself. I always kind of talk about it with, I used to be a big fan of Siskel and Ebert at the movies with the thumbs up, thumbs down when it came to movies, but I would still go see that movie. So, but Dave Meltzer, He has it, and it worked. People love that star rating system. People love his opinion. Listen, I'm not saying what I say on Busted Open is what you should be. It's my opinion, and you could either listen to it, argue it, call in, and debate me. And I think that's the same thing with Dave Meltzer. I respect Dave Meltzer for what he's created and what he's done.
Where does WrestleMania rank on the pro wrestling schedule for you?
As like right now?
Yeah, well, just like in terms of events, like in terms of events to cover and attend, is that right at the top? Do you prefer something with less pomp and circumstance?
It's at the top, Brandon, and the reason why is not even so much for the event itself, but for the week. WWE has done a great job of making it a week event, not just a night event. And I think it's also good for the world of pro wrestling. Like, you could be a fan of outside the world of WWE, go to Vegas this week for WrestleMania and still have a great time. Independent wrestling shows, WrestleCon. And that is because of WrestleMania. The reason that everyone is there is because of WrestleMania. I kind of look at it as a celebration of pro wrestling. Like, to me, it's the best event that there is.
Do you have a favorite one?
Oh God, it's a great question. A favorite WrestleMania. And you know what? I'm probably going to say last year's WrestleMania just because of the events that we did, celebrating with our fans.
Yeah.
If I go back and look at WrestleMania, I'll look back at WrestleMania 40 as one of my favorites in Philadelphia. Philadelphia has amazing fans. I also loved WrestleMania 30 in New Orleans because of the city of New Orleans and how everybody's in one area. So when I think about my favorite WrestleMania, it's probably about the week leading up than the actual WrestleMania itself. But if you're asking me my favorite single WrestleMania, it would probably be WrestleMania 3.
You mentioned that the build for this year's WrestleMania hasn't been as great as in years past. What is it missing?
I just think the value of every match on the show. I think it's very top heavy. I think they put a lot of focus on the main event matches and not every match. There's just some matches that haven't had a really great build. I mean, you're not going to say that about the main event. Cody and Cena, no problem. The triple threat with Roman, CM Punk, and Seth, great. Maybe even on accident, Tiffany and Charlotte. But some of the other matches, I don't know if there's been much of a story or build leading into the matches. Now, Brandon, once you get to Vegas and once we get to WrestleMania, none of that, you kind of throw all that stuff out of the window because you're there at the event and it's about the event. But I mean, I think I'm comparing it mostly to the last couple of years because some of the builds, like in 2015, 2016, weren't very good at all. I think I'm comparing it to how good the builds have been the last couple of years.
How surprised were you by John Cena's heel turn?
Anybody that tells you that they weren't surprised by it's a bunch of BS. I'm so like everybody now is like, oh, come on, you didn't see that coming. But until you actually saw it, you never believed it was going to happen. I mean, the guy's 10 months away from retirement after a Hall of Fame career, and that's when he decides to turn heel. Genius. So I was surprised. I was surprised by the F-bomb from Cody to The Rock, and then I was even more surprised by Cena's heel turn.
How effective has it been?
I've loved it. I know there's fans that haven't been the biggest fan. I think Cena's been great. I think his promos have been off the charts. I've loved the build. I think what's really helped is that they were in the UK. Those UK fans really embraced the characters and the personalities. I've really enjoyed the build for Cody and Cena.
What is the importance of having Cody Rhodes as the good guy when trying to make Cena the compelling bad guy?
I think it shows that Cody's the face of the franchise right now. I think this could be a passing of the torch moment. I think it could elevate Cody Rhodes. I was having this conversation on Busted Open this morning. Like, again, talking about social media. If you go by social media, Cody Rhodes' run this last year has been underwhelming. But if you go by attendance, sellouts, merchandise sales, I think it's a different story. I think Cody's done a very good job this last year as champion. And I think the WWE's business shows it.
What makes Cody compelling? Like, how does he connect to the fans?
I think it's a great combination of a few different things, Brandon. I think one being the son of Dusty Rhodes. So right away you're going to get the respect of the old school fan like myself that grew up watching Dusty Rhodes. I think for a younger generation, it's kind of got that factor if he's the ultimate babyface. And the other thing is when you get to the people who, buy into star ratings, and I think at the end of the day, he's a very good wrestler and a very good storyteller. So I think the combination of all those things is what makes Cody Rhodes. It's not one thing. I think it's a combination of all those things. So I think he's appealing to a very young fan, but also appealing to the parents of that fan because they grew up watching his father.
15 years ago or so, like when you started Busted Open, would you have thought that WWE would be able to flourish as much as it has without Vince McMahon?
I think a big reason why they flourished is because of the absence of Vince McMahon. I think a big reason why we've seen emergence, even like in AEW, is I think that fans were pretty unhappy with the creative of the WWE when Vince McMahon was in charge. Storylines that didn't have a finish, storylines that didn't go anywhere, characters that disappeared after a few weeks, insulting the intelligence of the audience. I don't think that's the case under Triple H right now. I think he actually leans on it. I've always said this, Brandon, and you may have a different opinion than me. I never thought Vince McMahon was a fan of pro wrestling. As crazy as that sounds, I don't think he was a fan of pro wrestling. I think he was embarrassed by even the term of pro wrestling. Triple H is different. Triple H grew up a fan. I think he looks at pro wrestling as an art form. And I think that's why creatively we're seeing a better product now. So to answer your question, if you would have told me it would have gone the way that it has, I totally understand why it's as big as it is right now, 15 years later. Is
there any chance that we ever see Vince try to get a role with WWE again? Like, I asked that knowing the allegations against him are, they're gross and horrific. But I think most people thought that he was gone when he retired in 2022, and then he did come back a year later. So, like, is there any chance that happens again?
I don't think so, Brandon, because I think again, like, because of those allegations and how disgusting they are and how just appalling they are. Like, I just don't think he'll be embraced. And I think it would hurt the product. I think that it would turn people off. I really do. I just, and that's, again, you're not going to get away with this anymore. Like, this is a different era. It's a smarter, more intelligent era. I think it's an era that's like, we have to understand, like, that this isn't we're not tolerating this anymore.
How should wrestling fans view McMahon?
Oh man, Brandon, that's a great question. It's a difficult question to answer, because can you separate the product that he made to the man himself? I don't know if I can answer that question. Like, are people going to accept what he did and separate it? I honestly don't know. Brandon, as an old school pro wrestling fan, even before all these I was never a Vince McMahon fan.
Yeah.
So because of some of the reasons I gave you. And now with this stuff, I don't know. Maybe people will be able to separate and say, look what this person built. And you got to give him credit that he built this empire, and without Vince McMahon, would we have 2 nights of WrestleMania? Probably not, but it's very difficult to not look past those things. And again, we don't know what's true, what's not true, but I don't know if you're going to be able to look past it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And so say we won't see him back with WWE. Do you think though that we will see him in some form with pro wrestling, whether that's starting a new company or something elsewhere?
I don't think so. I really don't. I think at his age, I think maybe he has to find that life after pro wrestling.
Yeah.
I can't speak for him. Maybe right now he's planning that next thing. Who knows? But I would think right now in this moment in 2025, as we're talking, I would say that's not going to happen.
Is there a pro wrestler that you were most surprised to see their career and their character take off and garner a big following at some point?
The Undertaker. When I first saw that character, The Undertaker, I kind of rolled my eyes and I was like, really? And it's become the greatest character in the history of pro wrestling. But when I first saw it, I was like, I said, I know you have creative liberties when it comes to pro wrestling, but here's a dead man. Like, I was just like, when I first saw it, I was like, come on. But yes, without a doubt, The Undertaker.
What about a pro wrestler, a character that you saw that you thought was going to take off and it didn't?
Well, that's a great one. A character that I thought was going to take off and didn't. I don't know so much if it's a character, but like I always thought when I first saw Barry Windham back in the NWA, I thought Barry Windham was going to be the next world champion. I thought he was going to be the next Ric Flair. Like I thought he had this great combination of being an amazing technical wrestler, but also the everyman. So I remember seeing him early on, even when he was with Mike Rotundo in the WWF. Like I really looked at Barry Windham like this is going to be the next big superstar. And listen, Barry Windham, people respect Barry Windham, but he never hit the heights that I thought he was going to. And then the other one, because I was a big world-class championship wrestling fan, when Kerry Von Erich went to the WWF, I thought for sure he was going to explode on the scene, and that never really happened either.
What has Pat McAfee been for pro wrestling?
He's been invaluable. I mean, Pat McAfee is the reason why I love Pat McAfee, and I got to give a shout out to Pat because he always gives shout outs to us because he's a fan of our show, which I'm very, very thankful for. He's not afraid, and he's one of the biggest sports broadcasters out there, Pat McAfee. He is not afraid to embrace pro wrestling and talk about pro wrestling. And I don't think there's ever been anybody that's done that like Pat McAfee has. And he doesn't do it in a way like, all right, let me sneak this in here, or hey, or with a smile laughing, all right, let me talk. He does it. He covers it like he does every other sport. So for me, Pat McAfee is amazing, extremely valuable to the popularity of the WWE.
Yeah, and even just like we talked earlier about wrestling becoming mainstream over the years, and here's McAfee now on ESPN, and now pro wrestling is getting a decent amount of coverage on ESPN because of that. So that's there's value in that too, for sure.
I mean, think about the fact that John Cena turns heel, and that's all over mainstream sports media.
Yeah.
So it's on the bottom ticker on ESPN. Yeah. Like, who would have thought that ever would have happened? And it has.
How has Joe Tessitore been received by wrestling fans? Just going from calling, Monday Night Football and sports on ESPN to pro wrestling. How has that transition gone?
Well, I'll use Adnan Virk as an example. Adnan Virk just was like obliterated by the pro wrestling fan. Just completely not accepted. I haven't heard much, if any at all, like complaints about Joe Tessitore. Like, I think he's been accepted pretty well by the pro wrestling fan. I think he's done a really good job.
What do you think of Nick Khan's rise in the WWE ranks over the last, I don't know, we'll say 5 years or so, and how has his influence been felt?
Well, you know what's crazy, and I don't know if you've watched it. Have you gotten a chance to watch the WrestleMania 9 documentary on Peacock?
I have not.
Well, at WrestleMania 9, he was a security guard, and here he is now running the show. Listen, when business is as good as it is and as strong as it is, I don't think you can complain about the job Nick Khan has done. And I think it seems like him and Triple H have a very good working relationship that I think has done well for the WWE.
Is wrestling kind of getting away from PG content? Is that a good move?
I don't think it has. I mean, they still bleep out the chants in the crowd, which annoys the hell out of me, by the way. So I don't really think they've gotten too far. We've seen a little bit of blood, but Brandon, like when, back in '84, when WWF was as cartoonish as it's ever been, there was blood. So like, I think we've definitely seen more blood, but I don't really think they've gotten, or I don't think they've gotten that far away from the PG product. I think it's still a bit family friendly for sure.
How does this era compare to the Attitude Era?
Wow. This is going to be a very unpopular opinion, Brandon. And you may turn off this stream as soon as I say it. I think the Attitude Era was a little bit overrated. And I think if you go back and watch some of those Raws from the Attitude Era, a little tough to get through, Brandon. A little tough. Now, not as tough as a 3-hour SmackDown on a Friday, but a little tough to get through at times. So, I think it holds up pretty well.
What is wrestling's target audience? Like, is it kids? Is it adults?
I think it's everybody. I think they're trying as hard as they can to please everyone right now. Like you said, the Attitude Era, teenagers and young adults.
Yeah.
The mid to late 80s kids. Definitely the PG era kids and families. I think they're trying to get everybody to like the product.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure they recognize that they still appeal to kids, but similarly to how earlier you mentioned that people who grew up wrestling fans, now they're decision makers. Those wrestling fans a lot of them are adults who are still wrestling fans. So like they have to continue to appeal to them as well.
So Brandon, let me ask you, what do you think of my opinion on the Attitude Era?
I'm the wrong person to ask. I think that's something I would leave that up to my producer, because I'm not the big wrestling fan. That's him.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
But I think there is something to the effect of like, I grew up in the Attitude Era. So like I think a lot of people now who are in their 30s, they similarly grew up to in the Attitude Era. So like there is that sort of nostalgia that maybe there are a lot of people that build it up bigger than what it actually was.
Okay, fair enough.
So I don't think it's an unfair answer.
Okay, thanks.
What is your favorite era of wrestling?
My favorite era was the early to mid 80s NWA. That was the pro wrestling I grew up with. That's the era that's my comfort zone. And when I go back and watch old wrestling, that's usually what I watch, like 82, 83 NWA. I love the territories. The territories were my favorite. I miss it because you had so many different shows, so many different areas, and the talent pool was bigger and it was different. That was my sweet spot, was the territory era.
Who wins this weekend, Cody Rhodes or John Cena?
John Cena. I think last year was Star Wars: A New Hope, and I think this year is The Empire Strikes Back.
Dave, you were great. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Define great, Brandon. I was okay.
It was entertaining. You kept my interest.
Thank you, buddy. Thank you so much, Brandon.
Thank you. That is Dave LaGreca. I'm Brandon Contes. This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Please rate and subscribe to this podcast. Please also subscribe to Awful Announcing's YouTube page. But regardless of how you consume Awful Announcing and the Awful Announcing Podcast, thanks for listening and be good.
Thanks for listening to the Awful Announcing Podcast. For the latest news spanning the sports media landscape and more, check out awfulannouncing.com and follow us at Awful Announcing.